Welcome. You are at the CCC.
Where there are no outside issues. Hi, my name is Bonnie Violet. I'm a trans, femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, digital chaplain, and a person living in recovery.
My name's Anthony. I'm a 7th-year doctoral student in clinical psych. I am in 3 12-step programs, and I care about you.
Yes, and I'm Lulu, and my pronouns are he and him, and I'm a former Miss Castro Country Club. Live in the Duboce Triangle part of San Francisco. That's like right across the street from Castro. I am in recovery for crystal meth and alcohol, and I am always in search of balance.
And each week we create and provide a brave space where we can engage in topics around recovery.
Yes, and our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for those people in recovery.
By tackling topics often used to separate us.
But before we do that, like, subscribe, comment, and ding that bell.
Ding, ding.
Yes.
That was hella smooth, guys.
We are so smooth.
Oh my God.
Share.
We've been doing it forever.
You know who else I think is smooth?
Yeah.
Our special guest.
I was about to say that.
He's a smooth operator.
I'm the smoothest here, but
I was about to say that right on.
Angel, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah.
yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Angel. I am not the guy from apartment 512. I love to laugh, and I am your name is Castro Country Club.
Yeah.
Ooh, who's the person in apartment 512?
Esa one song by Selena, el chico del apartamento 512.
Oh,
Yeah.
for Spanish-speaking people out there, Angel is quoting a song that's called "The Dude from Apartment 512."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
So it's really nice to have you.
Yes,
Thank you for
it's
having
lovely.
me.
Yeah, really good to see you.
Good to see you both.
Some of you may have remember a few weeks ago we were praising the Linda Summers or the reigning Miss Castro Country Club, and this was the person we were talking about.
Yes,
Oh my
exactly.
gosh, yes, I remember that episode. It was a good one.
Yeah, you played it over and over and over
I
again.
have it saved and everything.
So how is everyone?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm great. I'm amazing.
Great. How many adjectives can you come up with for good?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
That's great.
Yeah.
How about you, Bonnie Violet?
Oh yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm chilling in Oakland. I wasn't up for the travel today, so I figured I would hang out here and you three could be in the studio.
Fair enough. Well, it's good to see you.
Likewise.
Thanks.
How are you, Anthony?
I'm doing really good. Today's been a very busy day. I had a little bit of a fuck up this morning. I had to give a presentation at work at 9:30. I was in bed until 10.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh.
and then so I got all these text messages and all these voicemails, and I was like, what's going on? And then finally, long story short, my coworker contacted me and she was like, yo, you're supposed to be here. And I thought she meant like online. So then I call my boss and my boss is like, no, you're supposed to be in the office. We're not doing this via Zoom. Anyway, it all worked out great. I am very grateful for people who understand my working style, even if it sometimes means that they're rescheduling things.
My
But
working style.
my
I
working-
don't show up when I want to.
that's not where I was going. You can be negative. I was focusing on.
There was no negativity. I was just simply like stating, like it was just a statement.
Well, it's. Anyway.
I could have said like it sounds like an excuse. But
But you just did.
Okay.
You just did.
I know. Okay, yeah.
For folks at home, actually, I have nothing to say. So things are good. Things are really, really good. I'm really excited about today's topic. I was at a dinner yesterday, and folks started talking about our last episode.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I was like, why don't y'all like say this stuff on the speak pipe? Because some of the opinions and things that they said were not exactly popular. Well, there was one person who had very unpopular opinions about some of the stuff that we were talking about, and so it was a really nice.
Oh, that's what we
lively
need.
debate.
We need that kind
Yeah,
of.
I was like, you should really call. I almost picked up my phone, but it was someone's birthday dinner. I almost picked up my phone and said, "Hey, can you say that into my phone?" So it was in the speak pipe. But sure enough, yeah. So for folks at home, please don't keep your ideas to yourself. Call
Absolutely.
us, and we'll vet them, and we'll decide if you should.
Well,
keep
no,
them to
but
yourself.
I think it's super important for we may all seem to agree a lot, but it's super important to have a balanced conversation. And so I think the way that I'm challenged and I get to grow is when I'm exposed to different viewpoints, and especially when it's the way where we're validating each other's right to have those viewpoints. And I'm usually able to kind of expand my thinking about something. You know, I try.
Yeah. Well, and I think the big thing is like we've wanted to talk about some of these things for a long time, and we're not claiming to be like this is not a lecture, this is not a learn how to dot 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 dot. Like if you
Linda,
want to do that, go to college, right? But like we're just here to kind of just have the conversations and share things from where we're at, from our point of view and our perspective. I think that to some degree might even be more accessible, or at least accessible in a different way to a different group of people.
if you guys are watching, do you notice how fun and flirty Bonnie looks right now?
She really
The little
does.
side
It's
sweat.
the
Like, I
it's
love
the feminine. It's my feminine look today.
You say fun and flirty.
fun. And
Fun
I
and
always say like when they're describing themselves on RuPaul's Drag Race when they're going down the aisle, my look is this way, and I'm feeling so fun and flouncy. I'm a flouncy. What the flouncy? Okay.
Right. Flouncy is like a dessert, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So should we move on to today's topic? See what I did there, Bonnie Violet?
I know.
Yeah, it was not one of those things
Yeah.
that you can't speak of.
Because you're the arbiter of what
Right.
we cannot say. All right. So today's topic, in transition. Sorry. Oh,
You did it. Oh.
Wait, wait,
I was like, I'm so good. Today's topic is femininity. Basically, not in direct contrast to our last one because we don't want to set up the false binary, but so we are talking about femininity today, what this means, what comes up for you when you think about femininity, whether this is in your gender performance, if you believe that gender is a performance, whether or not you believe that femininity is something that's innate and biological. We welcome all of those opinions, all of them, even the ones that I didn't mention, and we will jump in. So, did anyone do any homework? Did anyone look up stuff?
I mean, of course, I pre-watch stuff every time. So yeah, I watched some things on toxic femininity.
Oh,
I shared that quote with you with Grace Jones talking about femininity.
yeah.
Yeah, like I've been kind of playing with it a little bit and thinking a bit. I think I even talked with Linda a little bit about it last night.
Can you talk more about this idea of toxic femininity?
I'd love to hear.
Well, yeah, it was interesting because it was kind of like one of those, and it was a millennial on YouTube. I can't think of their name right now, Elliot somebody, but they were talking about, and they're straight, but they have some really interesting things. But they were talking about to toxic femininity because somebody had put it in their comments for like a previous video that they had created. And so then they kind of took some time to kind of explore it and try to find out what it was really. And it is a term and there is something for it, but I think in a lot of ways it's kind of that in the same way you can talk about toxic masculinity, it is like the topic femininity, in which you can use femininity in a way that's harmful to another person or yourself. But at the end of the day, it's all like kind of buying into and pushing toward like the same narrative of like the patriarchy or whatever, which are all like really big words for me. But he was sharing this story about the idea that like say like maybe a little girl was growing up and her dad didn't let her do things because she was a girl, right? But then her mom was like, yeah, you need to not do that either because you're a girl and that sort of thing. So it's that idea that like it doesn't necessarily, you know what I mean, how even feminine people could feed into that kind of toxic femininity, a femininity that might lead to harm in some way or another, or I think most importantly inauthentic living and existence, I think is ultimately,
Yeah.
I think what comes from that, or what like the ailment is with that, I guess.
What's interesting is because when I think about at least the way we've been talking about toxic masculinity is about performances that hurt other people. So there's this acting of masculinity that hurts other people
Or yourself.
or yourself. But the way I hear toxic femininity, at least the way I'm conceptualizing it, it's not the acting out, but it's the restraining of what a person can do.
If you're kind of buying into that same sort of narrative, one of the things that was said about is this idea that like men say they might punch you in the face and attack you in that way, or like a masculine form would be like attacking somebody, but like feminine might be more of like attacking your reputation. Or they were talking about this idea of how social media in a lot of ways and the fights, if you will, that go on social media is more of a feminine way of reputation attacking kind of, I guess, way of combat, if you will, which I also thought was really interesting too.
Yeah, that's interesting. Angel, anything going on in your head? I feel like there's so much going on
I
up
heard
there.
butterflies.
Yeah.
No, the only thing that comes to mind is just like I think I recently went to a ball and it was so fun, and I was talking to my sponsor about it, and one of the things that I told him, or like, you know, for me it was so amazing to see so many beautiful people, and for me it was hard to distinguish who was trans and who was pretty or feminine, you know, or drag queen based on the level of femininity that I witnessed. And then one of the things that he asked me is like, why do you have to define it that way? You know what I mean? Like, why do you have to define what's, you know, why do you feel like you can define what's feminine and what's not, or you know what I mean? And I had a hard time really understanding what that means, because if we all go to a store, right, like it's already laid out in front of us, like what's in the men's section and what is, you know, for females, you know, or for women. And I realized that for me, like, you know, expressing myself in a way that may not be socially acceptable can be difficult, you know. And I realized that femininity to me is still something that I'm still exploring. Like, I don't really understand what femininity is, but I know I express it based on what I have learned by others. You know, if you wear pink, you're feminine. If you wear nail polish, you're feminine. If you walk and you move your hips, you're feminine. If you put your hand against your hip, you're feminine. But I just always wonder, like, why does it have to be that? You know, why can't it just be me being authentic? And I love that Bonnie mentioned that word, like, you know, what it means to be non-authentic and what it could mean to be just authentic. I don't know. I said a lot. I'm sorry.
No, that's great.
Great.
There's so much to chew on.
I know, exactly.
So much to chew on.
I know we're gonna get Linda to the point where it's Angel to the point where she's not apologizing for speaking up and telling us the truth.
No, that's wonderful. How about you, Louis?
Let's see. So there was a lot. It's like I can actually. I'll tell you a story. So I put on these boots and whatever, and I remember coming in I met with my sponsor before this, and I was like, "Ooh, I feel like a boy today. I feel all butch, whatever." And I don't know. The only story that I can share is I was watching Big Mouth from Netflix.
Oh, such a
Great
show.
cartoon. I mean, it's like, if you haven't watched it, it's a nice plug. It just talks about like all the different things that young people deal with in growing up and finding their identity. And two of the main characters, they're hormone monsters. They had a baby.
The hormone monsters.
Yeah, they had a baby.
Spoiler alert.
I know. They had a baby. And so they cast a non-binary actor in the role of the baby, and the whole deal was the episode was like when the child was born. The whole episode was how we put so much emphasis on pigeonholing somebody, and instead of just allowing them to be and not stress and giving them an opportunity to make that determination who they were going to become, or if they were going to fall closer to the male side or the female side or whatever. So I mean, that was my kind of connection to that. And yeah.
There's a comedian that came to San Francisco and they were saying that we should have laws, and one of the laws should be no gender until you're 14.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not a really good, but that's a really interesting idea, right? Because the toys can be pink, or they can be blue, or they can, right? And again, those distinctions are made very early on.
Yeah.
What I was looking for is the quote that I mentioned last week, but I had butchered it and I texted to everyone and now I can't find it. But basically it's a quote by Simone de Beauvoir, and she says, oh, there it goes. One is not born, but rather becomes a woman, right? So she was one of these thinkers who, so she, along with more, like one of her more contemporaries would be Judith Butler. A lot of folks know Judith Butler. Anyway, she teaches at Berkeley, and it's this idea that gender is a performance and gender is informed by the context in which it's being performed, right? And those decisions are made for us before we're even born, right? So to your point about, the child being born and already we're, I'm going to teach my boy how to play baseball, right?
Absolutely.
And then it's seen kind of, I've seen this more in the East Bay, where a parent will allow their child to explore their gender in all these different ways, be it wearing clothes that may not be conventional for how phenotypically they present, etc.
You know what? Speaking on that, I find it fascinating that when you have a parents who make a decision to allow their child to kind of explore themselves, other people can't mind your own fucking business.
Oh, it's hard for them.
Oh God, how dare you? And it's not doing anything or taking anything away. The other thing I was thinking when you were talking is like gender reveal parties. Gender reveal parties buy into it completely because obviously you have a pink or blue balloons and everything is a certain way. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like the first time I saw it, I used to think this is great, but then wait a minute. Now that we have language, and I think what it comes down to is having language. We didn't have language before. Now that we have language, why is it such a problem, to kind of take the shackles away as you will and allow people to kind of figure out who they are. Like if I didn't have these restrictions growing up, these things, and actually let me just say these things that I believed. I don't know necessarily that it was being forced on me, but I believe because I want to have connection. I didn't want to be not a part of. And so I played these roles and I tried to be the person who I thought people wanted me to be. And I compromised a part of who I was.
Yeah. Well, and I think, but gender isn't who we are. It's an expression. I think it's a way that we can express ourselves for some of us, but I don't think it's who we are. I think that's where it can be limiting. I think with any identity that we hold on to and kind of let it take up so much space, it becomes limiting.
But doesn't it help? Okay, so my gender helps to inform me, helps me to as I'm becoming who I'm supposed to be. Like obviously it's not all of who I am, but it helps to inform me because there are aspects of my maleness that are not toxic, that have helped me. Like I tell the story when I came out, and I don't know how this is connected, but I'm feeling it. So listen, follow me on the road.
Yeah.
When I came out, I didn't have
just looking at the time.
I know when I came out, when I came out, the only I was in my active addiction. I moved to the city. The only thing that kept me and sustained me was my gay identity. That's it. No matter what anybody thought, it's like I had all of a sudden I adopted this community and whatever, and I was a complete mess. But so what I'm saying about we're more than the sum of our parts, but these parts were really helpful for me in kind of holding on to who I was.
Well, and it's in some ways it's also how we communicate without words, maybe how we want the world to see us or how we want to be seen as well. And so I think that can be also like what kind of sexual partners or people we want kind of that are into us, or even people that we hang out with, or things that we get invited to do. I think, in some ways it's our language on how we can kind of present to the world how we want to be engaged with and how we want to engage with the world.
Yeah, the human mind likes to save energy, and so it's constantly categorizing things, right? And there are these shortcuts that we build, and I think we kind of get stuck in that I'm thinking a lot about, for example, the idea of mask for mask or masculine for masculine, right? This idea that I am putting out this, I've never put that out because that's silly to me. If it's not silly for you, that's fine. But this idea that I am going to put out this thing that I'm a masculine man and I'm in search of another masculine man, I am assuming that just based on that category, I already understand what I'm going to get. That's not true, right? It's just simply not true. And if it is, it's somewhat of a caricature. And my mind was blown there are these podcasts that I follow, and all the podcasters are all straight men. And I listen to them kind of like objectively, like as from the outside. And I think to myself, oh, this is so interesting because a lot of like the themes or the behaviors are kind of androgynous, or they may seem like quote unquote gay, but it's an entirely straight male audience, right? And so I was like, oh, this is really interesting to me because it is context specific, right? Because there's like this allowance that's made for that that flexibility that's not always made. I think, in my opinion, among circles of gay men or among queer folks in general.
Yeah. I just noticed something.
What did you notice?
Anthony, earlier he told me to shut up in one of the nicest ways.
Who did?
I'm looking at the time.
Oh yeah, no, I was making a joke about like, oh, is this going to go on long?
I know, it's like I've never been told to shut up, and that was so.
That was more like keep it brief.
Oh.
Yeah, that was more like.
We have a comment.
All right, let's
Keeping
see
it
it.
Hi,
Jaylon. Funny enough, this is a topic. This is the topic because just last night I had to decline an offer on an app because the profile said no feminine or fat guys. I told him I have feminine tendencies and that I don't qualify. However, I hate that I even have to, excuse me, I almost burped. I have to, in a way, defend, and or disclose an attribute about myself that has always been there. It's unfortunate, but this is a reality for guys like myself with a little extra sugar in their tank. Well said, Jaylon. Well said.
Oh.
You know, that makes me think about like the anon scene, right? This idea that for folks at home that may not be familiar with that, it would be anonymous sex, like as true to the word anonymous as possible. There's no talking. You just have two people meeting up and sharing each other's bodies.
Which is a joke because it's like you saw my picture and I saw your picture. We talked.
Well, assuming that doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Because there are like glory hole situations,
Oh, yeah.
right? There are like door ajar situations. There are like cum dump situations.
Ass up in the
yeah. For folks at home listening, check your Urban Dictionary.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brandon is listening.
Brandon's like, cum dump.
I wanted to comment on what Jaylon said. Like, I think it is totally relatable. Like, I have had to experience that, you know, at a very early, you know, young age, especially as soon as I turned 18, I went on Grindr, and I quickly realized that there was no space for us feminine guys.
Wait, you had Grindr with there?
Yeah, actually, it came out when it came out.
When I was 18, we didn't have social media. It was only a government thing.
Yeah, I think Adam for Adam was out. There was Craigslist.
You communicated with two cans in a string.
Exactly.
No, yeah, but I am, you know, I think to what Jaylon was saying, like, I think sometimes when what happens is that some of us tend to start hating ourselves and we stop showing up, or we stop wanting to be part of because of that kind of like treatment that we receive. And so I just wonder, like, why do we have to treat you know, people like that? You know what I mean? Like, why can't we just be more open-minded and just like allow people to just be?
Yeah.
You know, and I feel like I don't know, it just makes me wonder sometimes.
And it wouldn't be that big of a deal if it was just an acknowledgement of like that's how somebody expresses themselves. But oftentimes femininity or pointing out somebody's femininity, especially say on a male-bodied person, is often, you know, thought to be as a put down, or like, you know, like the bottom shaming, or the, you know, the I'm the top though, or mask for, you know, mask for mask. And, you know, like a lot of this stuff, it doesn't really matter because we all hold different things differently. It's just, I think it's the power that we put in it, and what more we're saying, like what we're really saying when we're pointing things out in that way. You know what I mean? We're trying to put you down for being feminine. So what does that say about, yeah, like what does that, you know, what does that say about you?
You know, okay, so this, I think, like, when I think about like people saying no this that or whatever, they're making assumptions or based on the ideas that we've placed on what it is to be feminine. I really feel like, especially with all that you were talking about, people are just, and especially gay men, that's where we're at, are not emotionally available. And I feel like if I say no fems, they're thinking that you're gonna come over and want to talk. And the truth of it is that I've connected with guys who are feminine, who, and it happens with me. My energy changes depending on how I am.
Right. And Don said it's says that we hate women. And I think that's the question that we have to ask ourselves, that there might not be that, you know, that direct I hate women sort of mentality, but there's probably some sort of programming that is telling us that to be a woman is to be less than, which is really interesting because I think it's just like it's and if we're talking about power, you know, I think we talked a little bit about this with masculinity, how like I think masculinity is meant to be powerful, and like this like mighty way, so to speak, or this physical way. Whereas I think the greatest strength is in vulnerability, which in a lot of ways is what's held by the feminine or the woman, so to speak. And that's really where the power lies, regardless, I think. And so I think it's interesting how there's just, yeah, there's just so much to unpack with it all, you know?
Yeah, there's so many thoughts coming up for me, and I've forgotten most of them. But the one that's coming up for me is, the other part of this that I think often isn't talked about is, and so what if a person wants to uphold gender norms, right? For example, during the conversation I had with some of my friends yesterday, one of the guys said, well, if I want to be with a masculine man because I'm a masculine man, there should be nothing wrong with that. Sure. And then one person chimed in and said, right, but that's because you have internalized homophobia. And then I thought, well, why do we have to pathologize what can otherwise be considered a preference? Now, I'm not saying I have any stake in that argument. I'm just simply saying that's what was said. And it made me think about how sometimes on the maybe we'll say the more liberal end, there is a type of inflexibility, right? That so is it okay, for example, for a man to say, no, I don't want to present as feminine? And can a man say, I don't want to present as feminine and not be pathologized? Similarly, can a woman say, I'm just speaking kind of conventional terms, can a woman say, no, I want to be feminine?
Okay, so
without there being pathologized.
I feel like there's a difference, like what you were saying. Okay, so I think it's okay for someone to say, this is how I want. I've decided that I want to be feminine, or I decided I want to be, I want to present as masculine or whatever. But when you say, I'm looking for someone who is masculine, it doesn't just end there. It goes under, what does a relationship look like? Because all of a sudden, am I supposed to be masculine in everything that we do? You know what I'm saying? It's like, is it that, like, I think that, maybe in some ways it's a cop out, and it's a cop out in a sense that, do you know what I'm getting at? It's like,
no, I want to fight you on this.
Okay, no. Okay, yeah. So I want a masculine person that if it's okay to do that in this experience. If we're hooking up, let's be masculine together. Let's bring all that toxic shit to that. But there's so much more to us than just this masculine identity. If all of a sudden I'm with you and I decide that I want to have a conversation about our feelings, and you freak out and you say that this is too, you're acting like a woman, or whatever, and that's it, because gay men say this a lot. We got to go because we can hook up or whatever, and we don't have to worry about talking about our feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of things you said. I can't believe I let this pass, but when you said gay men are emotionally unavailable, kind of as
let me qualify. Like, I don't think all, but a lot are.
But what I would say, my contention with that is, I would say that all people are emotionally unavailable. There are maybe things that inhibit it, but it doesn't mean that it's completely inaccessible. And I would argue that if gay men appear or seem emotionally unavailable, it's because maybe there are not contexts in which it feels safe, right? And I think there's a lot to be said for that. The other thing was, like circling back to this idea from last week, which is so many things about ideas of gender are so amorphous, because when we're talking about masculinity, for example, I've hooked up with people and they're doing their thing, either they're whatever. And I can always, most of the time I'm like, man, this feels so contrived, you're doing what you think you want me to experience of you. And I really just want you to show up as yourself, I forgot where I was going with that. I think
you were yelling at me and telling
me.
Yeah, I was like, you are so, I guess what I'm trying, I don't disagree. Well, I don't think agreeing or disagreeing is important. Go ahead, Bonnie Violet.
Yeah, I think the thing, it's not really about me telling you what's okay or what's not okay. I think it's about, as a person, about questioning why it is that I might have these things, and really trying to be honest with that. I think to some degree, it might not be, but it also might be something to explore if, with any sort of limitation. Like, what is that makes me want only like this? And I don't know if this is like a safe place to take it, but I think in some ways that might be similar to somebody deciding to not date somebody because of their race or because of their size or, you know, all these sorts of things, which in and of itself sounds icky, but also in some ways might be okay. Like, let's say you might like somebody of a certain race because you're a certain race, and it's a more of a cultural thing than it is about like race or whatever. You know what I mean? So I mean, I just think for, I think it's just an inside job for people to really like, it's not for me to tell you what you desire or what you're seeking is right or wrong. It's about you, I think, for any of us is to constantly question maybe why it is that this is what I want. If it's not, if it's not serving me.
Right. And I think a lot of people where they fall with this conversation is, well, isn't it just a matter of preference, right? And isn't there such a thing as free will? And there's so many, again, different ways of having that conversation. I would argue that no decision we make is our decision. Decisions are made for us, right? And especially what we're sexually attracted to, there are very few things that are universally considered beautiful, right? It has to do with like what you're surrounded by. One of the things that I think is really funny is if you look at Pornhub statistics and you look at the way, like if you look at every state, you can see what states look up the most, whatever. And you can usually see a connection between that state's politics and the thing that they kind of watch the most in that state.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something else?
Yeah, I was thinking of something, but
Well, I have another thing.
Okay.
So I'm always curious about what people are saying on the other side of the aisle, so to speak. And so I follow a couple conservative podcasts and I read a couple conservative columns. And I recently came across this one podcast or this one episode where they were talking about how liberals are protecting corporations, that liberals have corporations in their pocket, that blah 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 blah. And I was like, oh, that is so interesting, because when people talk about Republicans or conservatives, they're saying exactly the same thing. And so it made me think about how different are we really, you know, when we're having these types of conversations. And I appreciate what Bonnie Violet was saying about questioning why we might like or prefer certain things. And I think, you know, I think to some extent, in my opinion, like we don't have to question everything we do, right? Because if we questioned everything we did, then who would have sex?
Yeah.
Right. If it's not serving us, is what I said. Yeah.
Yeah, I caught that at the tail end. And I was thinking about like just the idea of questioning preferences.
I was thinking, well, the point that I think where it gets messy, like if I have preferences and I'm just living my life a certain way and I'm not feeling the need to kind of shout it at the rooftops, I think it's because social media now, we have these opportunities to shout it at the rooftops, to put in our profile, I don't want this, I don't want this, instead of just saying, I'm looking for, you know, the qualities, you know, everybody goes right to, well, not everybody, but you know, and the thing that we're talking about, no fats, no fat, like, why is it necessary to say that? Or why, you know, if I put in my profile, this is what I'm looking for, that should be enough. That should absolutely be enough. And I think that, again, it's just messy because I think it moves out of this area of preference and just becomes something problematic when you really are arrogant enough to think that it's okay to just have a conversation about it. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
Or say it out loud.
I do. Angel, what's going on in your head? What are you thinking?
One of the things that keeps coming to mind is just like, I just wonder when there will be a time when guys who choose to be feminine can stop being fetishized or ignored in the scene in general.
Yeah, I see that online a lot where it'll say like, I just see that online a lot where there is this preference, but like it's normally with a blacked out profile, which I think that's a whole other episode.
Yeah, but I mean, but it does speak a lot, I think, about femininity, and it's this idea of the feminine person, but the idea that you might even be attracted to femininity. I think, especially as like a queer man or a gay man or a masculine gay man, there's probably some sort of like, you know, because that feels maybe straight-ish, you know, like I don't know, you know what I mean? And so I think because there is so much of this like programming that gets put into us at such a young age, and then we start to live outside of that, it's so confusing because usually we're just like trying to still put ourselves into this box or this container that we don't fit in, but we don't know how to put it anywhere because there's not a place to put it, so to speak. Like there's not a normative place for these things to happen. And it's becoming more and more and more. But I think that's the challenge with it all. In transitioning, it's been like, oh, it's there's just so much. But like one of the things that I've noticed is that because I think like I'm trans femme, gender queer. So like I feel like I wouldn't say I'm a trans woman, but I am a trans woman who is gender queer or non-binary, if that makes sense. And so it's interesting how like I want to be a non-binary person, but where I'm at also and where I'm at right now, I want to be seen more as a woman first than like a man. So if you were to call me a man, that's gonna bug me more than you call me a woman. Um, it's this interesting thing, but I notice like I interview students for my job, and I notice because I'm meeting these people for like the first time, and sometimes I won't even turn on my camera so they can't see who they're going to go in to see because I'm obviously trans, and so I notice that I'll try to like speak lighter. Like I'll notice that my voice will change a little bit because I'm trying to do anything I can for them not to call me sir. Even though I say, hi, I'm Bonnie Violet, and my name says Bonnie Violet She, it's like all these little things that I'm noticing that I'm trying to do in order to get the person to address me in a way that I want to be addressed. And it just feels so icky that's kind of what's happening. And yet, um, I find myself feeling as if I need to present a certain way in order to be seen the way I would like to be seen.
That's interesting. I struggled a lot with this idea of when am I being authentic, right? So for example, I noticed that when I talk to my straight guy friends or I'm playing soccer and it's mostly straight guys, I notice that I show up very differently. I notice that the words I'm using are very different. When I'm with a group of straight women, I notice I behave differently. I know that I say different things. When I'm with a bunch of gay men, I notice that I behave differently and I speak differently. And for the longest time, I thought, well, am I fucking fake that I keep kind of changing all of these, like in all of these contexts? And
Yes.
is your answer yes, I'm fake?
Yes. I'm just
I disconnect. Yeah. I've gotten to a place where no, I don't think it's fake. And the reason why I don't think it's fake is because ultimately I think it's about communication and how people are going to be able to hear you. And I can hear the argument that, well, you should be able to show up in whatever way you want to show up. And sure, and that's just not the way people listen, right? It's very hard to listen unless, I don't know. And we've talked a lot about code switching, right? Yeah. We've talked a lot about intersectionality. And there's one last thought I wanted to share before we move on, because we're getting really close to time. I brought up before the idea of the theory of the absurd, which is it comes Albert Camus, a philosopher, and the theory of the absurd is basically that in a world where we're constantly trying to organize and find meaning, that we're found this creates tension because the world is at once filled with meaning and meaningless. And so we engage in this thing as though it's real, right? Like these meanings as though they're these kind of concrete things, when in fact they're actually kind of like ethereal, right? But it's kind of like the stock we put in them. And so I guess with all of that, I find a lot of strength in stepping back and saying, okay, these things are happening. I'm aware of these things happening, and let's call it what it is. I don't have to necessarily invest. But before we move on, Angel, is there something coming up for you?
No, not really. Just, I think this is a really great topic. I think that it's not talked about a lot, especially in the rooms. And I'm glad that this is an outside issue that's being talked about now, because I feel like, for someone like me who does, identify as feminine, right? Like, I think it was hard for me to show up to these rooms in general, or in any way, in any place really, because I was afraid to be judged. I was afraid that the same opportunities will not be given to me, or the doors wouldn't open for me, right? But I feel like the more, and I think what I still have what I have trouble accepting sometimes is that there was a time when everything was performative, right? Like I intentionally overdressed or did this, or showed up in a way that was like a little more, whatever. But I'm glad that I did, because it really did give me the confidence that I have today, right? I think being feminine is a form of confidence, and I know that it could be argued against, right? But it is a form of confidence, and I just feel like that's just what I have in mind right now.
Yeah,
That's
and
wonderful. Yeah, go ahead.
love all that, and I just want to say that it is not an outside issue.
Yeah.
I think if many of us were to, like in a fourth step, really look at femininity and masculinity and how it impacts our life, there's probably a lot for us to learn and gain from that. So I don't think it is an outside issue. And if you're somebody who's not in that power majority, it's definitely something that you're feeling impacted by. You know what I mean? And so I think it's a great, I just want to say it's not an outside issue. It's definitely not an outside issue.
Yeah. Shall we?
Jaylon has a comment. Jaylon says, I just think it's so unfortunate that I have to work so hard not to hate myself for something that comes natural to me. Sometimes it's hard to even turn off my turn to my community because of the things that are said and the heteronormative values that are upheld. Totally. I feel that. That reminds me of what I wanted to say too. It's like sometimes it's like you want to, like, I wish that my transness or my femininity didn't have to be part of the experience. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I don't like, I want to show up, especially in some of these situations. It's like when I was working in research, I had questioned how I was going to dress because I'm going in to interview people about pain management and chronic pain and all these sorts of things. And I was like, I don't want my expression or the way that I am to impede how I interact with this other person. And yet I was also feeling like, why the fuck do I have to? Or it wasn't even like, do I have to? It's just like, it didn't feel good to me to have to leave parts of myself that were so important to me at this time of my life, like at the door. And I think that's the conflict, is that like wanting to not make it always about you, but also still having these parts of yourself that you're still really trying to explore and figure out, that you need space to be able to kind of like just be in that with.
I hear that. I one of my favorite quotes, and we can start closing out. One of my favorite quotes I heard a long time ago was, "God is happiest when we are exactly who we were meant to be." And I think that is constantly changing. That there are very kind of, aside from like a moral compass, there's just so many different emotional and mental experiences that we can have, and my life is much fuller when I'm allowing myself to have those experiences. So how do we tell folks to get a hold of us? Where should they go?
You want to reach me? You can reach me at the gram at LouisLou86.
And I want to say, before I go into mine, I just want to say to Jaylon, like, I hear you. I felt what you shared with us, and I didn't want to go over it. We just kind of ran out of time, but I just wanted to let you know that I hear you, and I feel that totally. Thank you for sharing that with us. You can reach me, Bonnie Violet, at A Queer Chaplain on all of the things.
And you can kind of reach me at @LucasCCC on Instagram. I got a couple messages this week. Thank you.
Yes, well, we have an Instagram now for at the CCC podcast. So find us on Instagram and engage with Anthony that way.
Or you can just message me.
Right.
Okay, or you can email us at podcast@castrocountryclub.org. Or if you feel so inclined, you're feeling chatty, go ahead and leave us a message at our SpeakPipe at www.speak.com/@the-CCC.
The voice messages we got this week were awful.
Did we get some this week?
Well, one from you and one from Lulu.
We were trying to make sure it worked.
I know, right? Yeah, so folks, please do use it.
Angel, do you want to give folks your contact? Not your home address, but like
not my
IG.
home address, but yeah, come to Mascara on Saturday, November 19th. And if you want to follow me, please follow me at Miss Linda Summers on Instagram. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel. Thank you for being on.
Thank you.
Yeah, looking forward to Mascara.
The Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBTQ plus recovery community.
They provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth.
Their vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to community, opportunity, and support. You can find more information at castrocountryclub.org.
And tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m.-ish when we go live on our Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube channels.
And what Tuesday is that, Anthony?
Every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific
All
Standard
right.
Time.
That was awful.
It was.
Find us on all of your favorite podcast sources. And that's it. We love you. Come back next week. Tell your friends about us.
Bye-bye.
Like, subscribe.
Bye.